everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. Francis and Nate back at it. Nate has been touring Europe, bouncing around to various places with old castles and a lot of Nazis. But that's really anywhere these days, so
not
we really can't.
Really, I mean, the hilariously, not so. I mean, okay, yes, I had to travel through Paris, which was occupied by the Nazis and controlled by the Nazis, since all of France was. But actually, Switzerland famously not Nazi. Just there were some decent amounts of Nazi sympathizers in that country, and they definitely would have been occupied if shit had gone better in this whole thing with invading the Soviet Union. But that didn't wind up happening. They were like lower on the list of priorities, and the Germans were like, "Oh, it'll be an easy little mop-up invading Russia. No one's ever had a problem doing this before." And needless to say, it didn't work out for them.
Just taking a look at one map would have probably like, oh, this thing crosses 11 time zones. But I suppose if you take St. Petersburg and Moscow, then you're golden. So
I mean, like if everybody goes and holes up in Vladivostok, then it's like, okay, great, but they are far away. They are on the Pacific Ocean, so
yeah, certainly I can't talk shit. I have never successfully invaded Russia either, so I don't exactly have the best plans going forward. Anyway, it's been a while, Nate, since you and I got to sit down and talk. I've done a lot of interviews. You did some a recording with Tom and Joe, and so now we're back at it. Dad chatting away. So I already did all of my 4th of July cooking yesterday on the 3rd. Today is the 4th. We are recording on the day where it's okay to yell at British people. Although I assume, Nate, that like you as like kind of half British and also not being a complete jackass, probably don't throw it in everybody's face there. I don't know if I would be able to be restrained.
So hilariously, the term that they would use, the kind of slang term that they would use for colonial Americans who sided with the Brits, with the loyalists or whatever, and fucking moved to Britain or fought for the British and then ultimately typically left and either moved to Canada or to the United Kingdom, was actually they called them Tories, which is interesting because obviously the Tories that's also the term for the conservative and unionist party of this country.
Well, now we just call them Remainers.
No, actually, it's kind of the opposite. There are very few, relatively speaking, very, very few Tory Remainers because Boris Johnson basically kicked them out of the party, at least the members of parliament. The actual members of the Tory party, the people who... Because in the United Kingdom, unlike the United States, you can't vote in the primary for the party. There isn't really a primary, and you have no say in anything of what the party does unless you join the party and you pay a membership and you're like in good standing. So... that's who does the leadership elections typically, but like not really because like Labour switched it up a little bit to allow direct election, but the old way would be like you basically would elect delegates and then they'd go to a conference and then they just do what they want. And they still don't have primaries for candidates. It's very difficult to select your actual local candidate. And the Labour Party all of us saw it coming, but everyone in the British media pretends to be surprised. It's been taken over by a hard right faction that's basically Tony Blair Part 2. And they were famous when they ran the party for doing things like just, a party thinks they can change their member of parliament. Well, we're going to just suspend that party and then drop in a new person. And it's like, oh, you don't like that your MP voted for the Iraq War? Well, here's someone who did vote for the Iraq War. It's like, oh, you don't like the fact that your MP is a right-wing shithead from London when you're a Labour seat in Liverpool. It's like, well, here's a piece of shit from London in your Labour seat in Liverpool. Deal with it. Like there is no... In America, it's kind of a thin veneer, but you do periodically get... get upsets,
and,
but like
AOC
in Britain,
can win. You can get a Bernie Sanders in every once in a while,
but an AOC basically eventually gets subsumed by the shitness of American politics. But they're at least like that wasn't what the Democratic Party wanted. They wanted Joe, whatever the fuck his name was, to be the he was like one of the senior, like the most longest serving Democrats in Congress representing Queens and the Bronx, and she beat him in the primary, and so she wound up winning the general election, and then she was a congresswoman. That just doesn't really happen. I mean, like when there are upsets, typically like the British political establishment moves heaven and earth to make sure that like it goes nowhere and it's basically deemed illegal. So I wouldn't say that America is thereby more representative because you look at like actually changing anything in our system is designed to be as hard as possible. But here it is kind of interesting the degree to which like when people say, "Oh, I don't vote because it won't change anything," like they're not necessarily wrong in the sense that like so much is built into the system to make it almost impossible. And a lot of that, in my opinion, has to do with the fact that like the way the parties are constructed is such that like it's meant to be as small and selective a group as possible. And it's also like they aren't governed with any kind of what you might call direct democracy. Not that anything in America is. Like primaries just don't happen.
Yeah, it sounds like Britain continues to be like, I know we got rid of the monarchy, but what if we still had just like...
They didn't get rid of the monarchy.
Well, I mean, the monarchy is not like they have
it's part of
representative.
The government. It's part of the government. Like the government functions. The head of state is the king. Like the king gives assent for like the laws passed by parliament. Like it's not like a figurehead. Like it's literally part of the government here.
Yeah, well.
Like it's not a massive part, but it is a part of it. Like it's not like fucking Denmark or whatever, where like it's just basically a sort of vestige.
One of the few countries that doesn't have a Freedom from England Day is England.
Yeah, exactly. Which
one
is funny
day,
because they were like, oh, we're going to Brexit and that'll be, British Independence Day. And it's like, oh, lots of people celebrate independence from Britain, but not in the way that you think.
Right. Your independence of Britain, not from Britain. But eventually, maybe someday, England will divorce itself from itself. And
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that without getting too in the weeds of this stuff, I would say that like the likelihood of Scottish independence is not as high as Scottish nationalists want to claim. It is still, let's say, feasible, but the referendum failed in 2014, and like basically the way the British establishment works is that if a referendum fails and we wanted it to win, then we'll just run it as many fucking times as we have to until we get the answer we want. And if it doesn't win, if it's something they don't want and it doesn't win, they're like, well, then you can't do it ever again. And like, it's been decided for a generation. And so that in that regard, Scottish independence and Brexit, like if there was I can't imagine them rerunning a referendum to rejoin the EU. And I certainly can't imagine the EU letting the UK join without some very spicy fucking consequences. Like let's say forced to join Schengen, forced to join the Eurozone. I just don't see it happening. And in fairness, like, to this being a historical pattern, the referendum on whether or not they should join the European Economic Community was in like, I think it was in 1976, but it was in the 70s, and it wound up passing. And then the next one they had was in 2016. So it's not like they were running it over and over again. But
they should.
Then again,
every 4 years, Scotland should run an election to see if they should leave or not. But then, like, if they do leave, they should continue to run it to see if they join back up.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would say is probably more politically possible would be Ireland reunifying. But that's obviously, it's not like that's just a thing that's on the docket right now. It's just that I think there's more political will for that. And I think that you're in a weird situation too, because Northern Ireland, as part of the Brexit deal, is like in a strange kind of like Venn diagram overlap, where it actually gets to be part of the UK and thereby not in the European Union, but also part of the Republic of Ireland and therefore in the European Union. So like the Unionist parties, who are like the hard right pro-Brit parties, Protestant parties in Northern Ireland, they didn't want that. But obviously if they didn't retain what they had, in the European Union, then you struggle, because like the whole kind of consensus around the Good Friday Agreement was that there is not a hard border, because technically speaking, it's different countries, but the borders are like basically open, and that there's a significant amount of tension around that. So basically they were trying to bluff their way through it and be like, oh, we'll just basically undo a chunk of the Good Friday Agreement. And that's destabilized things a little bit, but it's also weird now too, because like businesses that want to have international locations to serve the UK, but not deal with all of the fucking pain in the dick problems you have with like, now you've got to get fucking import taxes and value added tax and all these things because they're not in the EU anymore. They can base themselves in Northern Ireland. And so to me, I'm like, there could be a situation where, as much as we, people who want to see Ireland reunified, and I'm not taking a stake in it, because like I think the fucking 6 counties are a colonial possession of Britain and it's fucked up that it happened, but like I'm not Irish. And so like there's a lot of stuff that goes into what that would entail that's going to be a lot simpler than just like fucking snap your fingers, reunify. And as a result, like I don't want to speak out of my ass, because though I am not Irish American, I am in fact American, and God knows y'all don't want to hear me. But what I am going to say though is that like, I'll just finish this. What I am going to say though is that you could also see a kind of weird inertia, in my opinion, because like Northern Ireland is one of the poorest, it's like the poorest part of the United Kingdom. And so this weird sort of compromise position where they're technically in both kind of allows them to benefit a lot from people, who want to do business in the UK and the EU. And so I could see the Unionists kind of like, I don't think their rhetoric is going to change, but like they'd accept that as a weird kind of compromise, I think, given that it's going to like make their, not that they're really represented, like accountable to their constituents, but it's going to make people a little bit happier because like, if you look at median income in Northern Ireland, it's like £14,000 a year, or like it was recently. Like it's by far the poorest region of the United Kingdom. And it's like, well, it could have been rich if DeLorean had succeeded, but they just didn't want to fucking let a man win.
They didn't want to let a man design gull wings and do a shitload of blow.
If fund it with cocaine and suitcases.
Yeah, if Irish reunification did happen, does Ireland then become part of NATO? Is the next question. Since the UK is, but Ireland isn't. So
it's not reunifying like back to pre-1922. Like it would be reunifying that the Republic of Ireland would absorb the 6 counties in the north. It's not like the Unionists would love for reunification to mean that like all of Ireland becomes part of the United Kingdom again. But there's a whole big old conflict that happened that Joe did a great series on the Easter Uprising or the Easter Rising and a variety of things like that as regards. But basically, until the early 20th century, the United Kingdom controlled all of Ireland. Ireland was a colonial possession, right? You know, separated only by the Irish Sea. And so when they talk about reunification, what they're entailing there is that those counties in the north become part of the Republic of Ireland, and therefore they would not be in NATO. They wouldn't be in the UK anymore. So they wouldn't have any reason to join NATO. They would be in the Eurozone. They would be in the EU. They technically still are in the EU, kind of, in a way, because it's complicated. But basically, if you're born there, then you are. As I understand it, if you're born there, I don't know if you have to be like fucking prove Irish ancestry, but I doubt it. You technically are eligible for both a British and an Irish passport. And so with an Irish passport, you're an EU citizen. You can go anywhere in the EU. Typically to Berlin or Spain, because that's where, or London, because that's where a lot of young Irish people go. But if you wanted to be like, I want to fucking live in Cyprus, I really want to live in Malta, I really want to live in, I think Malta's in the EU, I really want to live in Bulgaria, I really want to live in Croatia, you could. But if you're British, no, fuck you, you get to live in Britain.
That's it.
And Ireland, because it predates independence, they have a free movement treaty. So you could technically go live in Ireland for 5 years, get Irish citizenship, and then escape. Then you could finally move to Bulgaria.
The grand escape away from England is to go live in Ireland for 5 years first. Hey,
yeah, we talked about this, but
there's worse ways to escape, you know?
Yeah, I think Cynthia and I, the reason why that never entered into the realm of possibilities for us is because Ireland is insanely expensive. And unless she got like a big tech company job, the salaries are not great. And also the weather is worse. Now, Irish people, of the Irish people I have met, they are all way fucking cooler than the Brits. So there is that. But like the reason why so many Irish people are emigrating, especially young people, is because Ireland is the perfect example of how wealth as assessed by GDP per capita doesn't mean a goddamn thing. And housing has gotten incredibly expensive. Wages outside of jobs that probably aren't hiring Irish citizens anyway, they're bringing people from abroad, are not great, and cost of living is high. And so it's like, you know, I remember seeing a comment from somebody that it feels like a new sort of coming of age tradition has emerged in Ireland, that it's like between 18th birthday drinks and 21st birthday drinks is like drinks to say farewell, because this person is emigrating to Australia or Britain or Germany or wherever, you know, because like it sucks.
Yeah.
And so, but you can get an Irish passport after 5 years of legal residency, and then you can live in the EU. So you can go live in Croatia until it gets Airbnb'd to death.
No, that's collapsing too. Everything, all of our illegal hotels and illegal taxi cabs are collapsing, and so are our social medias, and that's fine. You guys should probably go outside more anyway. I have not, Nate, I know you're not really on Twitter anymore. I have yet to reach the maximum capacity of looking at tweets, which I know a lot of stuff's broken, but I'm still good. So I'm still there, posting away.
I mean, I got rate limited the first day when they announced it.
Yeah, when it was still in a broken state over the weekend, But yeah, they eventually kind of evened it out. My shit works fine, but it's still, here's the problem: it's still full of like the dumbest people in the world. So you know, and now they can pay $8 to put their their decisions in your face. What I do want to talk about, though, Nate, because we are slowly, surely transitioning more towards dad stuff. We haven't talked about the weather, but we did yell about British politics, which is also the thing we normally take up the first part of the podcast with. But so my daughter has really been getting into comic books and everything. She's big, like she's already correcting me on shit on who's DC and who's Marvel. It's very annoying. But the other thing that she's been getting really into is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I was curious what because like at this point I'm like, cool, yes, let's watch the movie, let's watch the cartoons from my time, and then they have cartoons now. They all suck because I don't want to like say that it's not like kids TV shows today have a formula basically, and the formulas are very formulaic, I suppose, and the story, they're very basic stories, and in the end everybody learns that sharing is what we really need to do to fight the world. I seem to remember the cartoons when I was watching them younger were not really that. It was more like if you punch things in the face hard enough, your problems get solved. So I was wondering, what was your relationship with like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles growing up?
Oh, I absolutely loved them, but So I started watching when I was probably about 4 or 5, and obviously I was aware of the toys and the t-shirt, the merchandise, all the stuff. Loved the show. I remember seeing the first Ninja Turtles movie in theaters. The one that had the Vanilla Ice song in it.
Yeah, 1990 was that.
Yeah, and
one.
It was right before we moved to Germany, so we were living in Rhode Island. My dad did a year at the Naval War College as like an alternate, what they call ILE now, or they did when I was in the Army. Basically, the job you do as a major before you go and like take senior staff job stuff. Instead of doing it for Leavenworth, he got offered a slot at the Naval War College, and I think my parents would much rather have lived in Newport Naval Base, Rhode Island, than Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So we lived in Rhode Island for a year. And yeah, that's when I can like really, when we lived at Fort Ord in California, I was really little. I mean, I was 4 when we left. I remember it. But I just don't know. Like, I remember watching the Care Bears and like the Brave Little Toaster, but it was really when we lived in Rhode Island when I was 5 that I got into Ninja Turtles. I remember turning 5 and getting like Ninja Turtles toys, and then watching the movie. But like when we lived in Germany, it was really challenging because they didn't air the Ninja Turtles show on TV there, and my parents couldn't afford satellite. So we just had terrestrial TV, which
you didn't have AFN back then, did you?
Well, we didn't get AFN off post. You could have it on post, but we didn't live on post, and so you didn't have digital TV.
Yeah, you just had German TV.
And German TV was fucking terrible. I don't know if it's still bad, but Germans who are listening to this show, es tut mir leid. However, I think any of you who are old enough to remember terrestrial, like non-cable, non-satellite, I don't think they ever had cable, satellite TV in the early 90s. It was fucking dog shit, and so we just didn't watch TV. Like, my parents got a dual region VCR finally after like a year, so they could watch VHS from on post at we called it AV Club on post. It was like Army Blockbuster, and then also so they could watch movies they bought in Europe, because my mom had a lot of friends because like living near Stuttgart, there were a lot of people who came there internationally for like to work at Porsche or other like car related things. And so there were like a lot of Brits, Irish, South Africans, Australian, New Zealand in the greater Stuttgart area. And my mom made friends with like a community of people. And so like that way we could watch like BBC tapes. That's how I watched like Blackadder and shit. But Ninja Turtles, other than coming out of their shells, the fucking live music one, which I don't know if you ever saw, there was, are you familiar with this one?
I'm familiar with it. I never saw it.
Yeah, I had that. I got that on VHS, and I watched that thing like nobody's business. I watched it so many times. But it's like a stage play musical with like costume actors as the Ninja Turtles.
Hold on,
and some bitchin' rock tunes.
Fuck, I do remember this. I had to look at it. Oh my god.
I only remember a couple of like the hooks from like, we gotta fight for what's free, we gotta fight for what is right, we gotta fight to be free. Oh, the ninjas help tonight, something like that. Like, I'm remembering it from like, fucking 1991.
I love.
So
I'm just kind of like flipping through it, and the costumes are pretty incredible. Like they have, the mouth moves and everything, and this is the 80s and all that. But yeah, it is a very strange kind of stage play, and they keep doing the MTV like, let's turn the camera up 45 degrees and 45 degrees the other way to make it seem like there's more action happening here,
and see the and face the crowd and get lots of 90s outfits and little kids with Ninja Turtles costumes on.
Oh, they cut a promo at one point. They got like a wrestling promo.
What's interesting to me about Ninja Turtles, though, obviously my brother is a little older than me, and he was really into Nintendo. And so I remember him getting the original TMNT game for Nintendo, which is weirdly, like, it's not the most user-friendly game. Like, it was fun, but it's kind of hard.
Oh, it is a frequent internet meme among us older millennials. I hate the word elder millennial because that was a term that was obviously invented by a millennial. But those of us who are in or approaching our 40s, and you did play that game, it was maddeningly difficult, especially the swimming. Like there was a swimming level, and you had to go through like for some reason there's like electricity shooting through, and you had to go through these. You had to go through these fucking barriers, and the like spot in between them was so small that like it was hard to hit it. So
it's weird. It's weird because like my brother is 2.5 years older than me, and so I have these memories, and it's like it's not as if like an 8-year-old is so much more mature, but like when you're 5, an 8-year-old and his 8-year-old friends are way older and cooler. And so I just have like it's kind of this strange memory zone of like both being in kindergarten and watching Eureka's Castle and getting put down for a nap, but also playing this game that was like, it has become, like you said, a kind of a meme. I didn't realize that it had been, but I mean, it's intermixed with other games, and I don't want to derail talking about Nintendo, but we played the fuck out of it. And then my parents decided to sell it when we moved to Germany, and then gave in like a year and a half later and bought another one.
Did you have to buy like a specific German one? Like,
no, we bought it on post.
Like, why? I don't understand selling it. It's not like, I mean, was there a weight limit?
Because my mom would go through these phases of just being like, Nintendo is horrible and rots your brain, we're going to sell it.
Yeah.
And then my parents would have these ultimatums, and then they would change their mind like 3 months later. But like they were just weird. I'm
gonna tell you, Nate, you're gonna become a parent and you're gonna do the exact same fucking thing.
No, I will. Look, man. Oh, yes, I understand that I will, but like as regards how fucking erratic and like my mom one time heard me singing along to a Bloodhound Gang song and took all of my CDs and broke all of them.
Okay, taking them certainly. You should not be singing Bloodhound Gang out loud around your mother, but
right, but like when you're
snapping and breaking them, that's fucked up.
Like she confiscated all our CDs. Like it was so, and then she's like, "I'm gonna listen to every single one of them, to break every single one of them." And she wound up breaking a bunch, and then just like giving up.
It's a lot. I'm sure you had a lot of CDs.
Well, I mean, yeah, maybe. Like I probably had 20 or 30. My brother's older, so he had a bunch more. Like he wasn't quite driving at that point, but he definitely had like spent more money on CDs. And it was just like, okay, if you're gonna do that, then actually do it. But yeah, I like there are a lot of things where like my parents were just they it was pendulum swings.
Yeah, the ultimatums we give in on are like, well, fine, we will order pizza tonight. Like, just nothing that requires us to like do anything afterwards, though.
Yeah, and so like, basically, my mom, they bought. I think this is very funny. My mom would always insist on these like hard limits on stuff, but then like she got into playing Dr. Mario on Game Boy and like gave herself
that caught everybody's mom, dude. I don't know.
And she got a fucking neck condition. She had to go to a doctor, and the doctor was like, "Oh yeah, I see this all the time. It's Nintendo neck." And I'm like, "You're the one saying it's bad for us. My brain's not fucking rotted at all. I'm great, but you've given yourself fucking neck arthritis from playing a goddamn video game, a puzzle game."
Mom got that Dr. Mario. Ironically, Dr. Mario sending her to the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Who would have thought? So yeah, but I was thinking about this with Ninja Turtles. Living in Germany, like they were popular, but they were nowhere near as popular as in America. And so I just
was popular? What did the kids in Germany like? What were the superheroes of Germany in the 1990s?
That's a really good question. I mean, like,
and I mean that, like, truly, that I think of these things as like from an American point of view. If Germans might say, of course we didn't fucking have Saturday morning cartoons, you burger eating simpleton. Like, we did educational shit, or we did, like, I just don't know. Like, but I mean, everywhere's got kids. Everywhere can do animation at this point. So I would be surprised. Like, I know you said it was dog shit, but like, what was German Power Rangers? Like,
well, they didn't. I don't recall. Like, okay, if you want the honest answer, the thing that kids were really into was fucking David Hasselhoff
Hell
and
yeah.
Knight Rider,
Okay,
but
yeah.
specifically David Hasselhoff, because David Hasselhoff did like children's albums where he sang songs in German, so he was really popular. But then, like, weirdly, you'd have things like, there was this cartoon, like a comic book. It wasn't TV. Called the Marsupilami, and I don't even know if it was German or if it was probably French, because a lot of comic books for kids and adults in Europe were just like translated from French, because there's a huge industry there. There was Lucky Luke, also French cartoon thing. There was like some TV shows, but like they just didn't air that much because there weren't that many channels. I remember my friends watching some like cartoon TV things at home, but to be honest with you, it just wasn't as ubiquitous as the stuff that we all grew up with. Like all of the Saturday morning cartoon shows that we're familiar with. The Simpsons, though, did become popular in Germany, and that was a little after we moved there, because like the Simpsons were brand new when we moved over, but like the Simpsons actually became super popular there. And it was less as like seen as a thing for kids as much as a thing for like adults there. But it was very, very, very popular. And anyone who speaks German will know, if you're American or you're an English speaker, German Homer has the most annoying voice in the world. And I'm sorry, once again, I got to knock Germany, but like, if you grew up with that, then it's normal to you. If you grew up with, was it Dan Castellaneta is the guy who voiced Homer? Like, the guy who speaks in German talks like this. Like, it's really, really annoying. And I'm not making this up. So yeah, like, I'm going to bring it to the end here, which is about Ninja Turtles, which is, fuck, man. So I remember reading the Eastman and Laird comics, the ones that the TV show was based on.
Yes,
and I would have been
dark
about
fucking ones, right?
Yeah, they're really, really dark and violent. And something that I always find very interesting about, obviously, like, they really toned them down violence-wise, language-wise as well for kids.
Well, so the cartoon had a weird change. Like, I had to look this up because I remember two different kinds of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoons. From when we were younger, because like it started out as goofy and fun, and then like apparently around season 7 they just got really dark with it, but that was more towards what the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were all about. Like, they didn't have colored masks that told that it was all black and white, and they were all just fucking violent as shit. Like, am I remembering that correctly?
You are, but I also remember there being some color comics as well. And something that I find interesting is that Eastman and Laird's conception of wherever, what is the city that they're set at? I can't remember, like Metro City or some fucking shit. I can't remember the name of where they live. Like, but their conception of it in the comic books makes you think that like every city is just basically the Warriors. That like if the sun goes down, then like gangs of like white hoodlums who know fucking kung fu will come out and like whip your ass. Like, it's a very, very strange worldview. And I guess the other thing I'd say too with Turtles is, I remember the video games. So there was Turtles in Time for Super Nintendo, and we did eventually get a Super Nintendo. And that game, I remember my neighbor, my best friend, got the German Super Nintendo, which was different. Like the games weren't compatible. The controllers like were different colors. The game cartridges were shaped differently. But he got Turtles in Time. And we played we were like 8 years old. We played the fuck out of that game a lot. I have a lot of fond memories, and thinking the music was like the best music ever because it's catchy video game music and you're 8 years old.
Right. So you've never heard MIDI sounds like this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like so many more layers of MIDI instruments you can tack on. Because you think about how primitive, I mean, for its time it was advanced, but how primitive the stuff was on NES. And still good. Like, holy shit, the soundtrack to Mega Man 2 is incredible. I can't really do the Coming Out of Your Shell song off the top of my head, but I could absolutely hum a ton of the Mega Man 2 songs from like theme music for every level from memory, because like I absolutely loved that game. And like Contra and, I can't remember.
For me, it was the arcade game, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. That's the one game that I remember the most, because my parents didn't get NES. They didn't mind me playing them over at other people's houses. And at some point, my mom did break down and buy me like an original, like the old Game Boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're just like, we don't want that shit in our house. So I never got to play any of that stuff. But I could go to arcades, and that's where I played all of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff there, because you could get like 3 of your buddies. You could all gather around and play the same machine together. It was very much like the Simpsons game around the same time, where you could
also insanely hard.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about the arcade game?
I remember the arcade. Well, I remember the game for arcade. I don't know if I played it. I remember played
the shit out of the arcade version one.
I probably played Bart's Nightmare on Game Boy, and it was really hard. What I was going to say about it was I just realized I don't really have a ton of like childhood experiences in arcades, because my earliest memory is like, I can recall, like literally the earliest I can recall being alive is sitting in my bedroom playing this like cassette tape someone gave me for my 3rd birthday that was like, Nathan, it's your birthday. It's like one of those things where they've written a song and like they just personalize it to your name. But that was living on Fort Ord. And then we lived on the Newport, was it Naval Activity Newport? And then we lived on Patch Barracks in Germany for like 6-7 weeks, and then we lived off base. And then all of my interactions with stuff like that, with my parents, where we'd get taken places, was on base. I mean, we'd go to some local stuff, but it was way cheaper back in those days for them to buy stuff at the commissary and the PX than it was to, convert money to Deutschmarks and go and buy it, what they say on the economy, but like out in Germany. And then we moved to New Mexico when I was 8, and we lived we lived so far from anything that the only way you could get to a store was to cross like a major highway. Like we just weren't allowed to. Like there was nothing in the town. It wasn't a town. It was like a subdivision. And so to do anything required our parents to drive us places. And I think once or twice my mom let me go and play in the arcade at the Via Linda Mall in Santa Fe when like Mortal Kombat 2 was still an arcade game.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I bring this up is because when I was a little kid, and like those ages when you might have done a thing at like a kid activity where there'd be arcade games, well, on Army bases, the arcade games were in places like intended for soldiers.
Yeah.
So my mom wasn't just going to let me fucking hang out there. You know what I mean?
Go hang out at the MWR around a bunch of other like
the bowling alley, or like some of the like activity centers and things on post. Like they were all. I think the only memory that I have of playing a game in an arcade before like the age of 10 was playing a broken ass fucking Final Fight arcade game in Italy when my parents we had a stopover because they insisted on flying Space A because they were really cheap, and it wound up getting fucking diverted all across Europe. And we wound up in Aviano one night, and we went out for dinner, and my dad gave me like 10,000 pesetas, or no, pesetas was Spanish, I can't remember, lira, like 10,000 lira, however the fuck it was, which is like $1 or some shit. And to put it in like this completely screen glitching, broken, not really playable Final Fight, that was it. And it was all in Italian. I never went to arcades.
We have taken Lily to, so I did Showbiz Pizza, which is now Chuck E. Cheese. Same concept. I think Chuck E. Cheese just bought them all up. But we took Chuck E. Cheese it's a fucking trip. Like you got to be prepared for Chuck E. Cheese, just because like anything can go down there. Like going to Chuck E. Cheese is like kind of like being on a major military base in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's like you're mostly safe, but like anything could happen. So for my wife's birthday recently, we drove out to Dave & Buster's, and luckily the kid really likes Dave & Buster's because that place is a little. I mean, it's for adults, but also it's not like what you're saying, the bowling alley or anything. But of course, also we have to drive there. There are no arcades nearby where we are. Just arcades just don't really exist. Ironically, though, there is a place up the street from us that sells arcades and pinball machines. I don't know to whom, but we do. The bar. If I do go drinking at a bar, there's a bar called the Silver Ballroom that has pinball machines set up in it, and I'll go there. But that's just because it's the only place that I might run into somebody I know. And then we have like a pinball museum out in like South Roxana, Illinois, which like if you're thinking, wow, I haven't heard of South Roxana, it's because it's like basically a gas refinery that has a couple of houses around it. But there is a pinball museum out there where you pay. everybody pays $10. They have like, I mean, it's been a while since I've been, but they had like a little toaster oven in the corner, so you could bring your own beer, you could bring your own food, you could cook food in the toaster oven, and you could just play pinball all day. But again, you had to go out and do this by the light of the gas refineries and breathe in God knows what. So all of my most of my experiences with arcades were when I was older, but the mall that I went to had a place called Tilt, and it had like, the cool blacklight mini golf and stuff, and it had all the shooting games and shit like that. And it was great because like what you would do is like your parents would come to the mall, and it was like there's the food court, and then instead of just being a big food court and there's tables everywhere, all the tables and chairs, I mean, there's plenty of places to sit, but they all are around this big like open staircase that went down. There's stairs that went up, stairs that went down. You go up, you're going to the movie theater. You're going down, you're going to Tilt. And what your parents would do is show up and then give you like $5 and kick it down into Tilt and say, don't fucking go anywhere. Just be down there, and when you run out of money, come up and sit up here, and we'll come get you and we'll get something to eat. So I do have some fond memories of them, but like you said, like there was never really anywhere that I could walk to, but eventually I was able to ride my bike wherever I wanted to, and my parents didn't give a shit. So I don't think we have, like, nowadays, it's just like the idea of that is like, even I don't want to fucking ride a bike anywhere, especially in the city, run over by half the people here. So I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, my mom probably, you get to a certain age, and I think being the youngest, like, your parents are probably a little more willing to trust you if like you have an older sibling who hasn't fucked up as much. Like, so my mom probably wouldn't have let my brother play in an arcade by himself when he was 10 or 11, but when I was allowed to, because by that point he was, a middle schooler. And so, yeah, like, but I remember playing Mortal Kombat 2 in the arcade and at the mall. I remember playing
Mortal Kombat,
was it Primal Scream?
Yeah. All the really bloody, like, spine-ripping fighting games and shit that like your moms are just like, this is it. This is going to be what ruins the world. And you want, if you go, like, if you're younger, go watch any of the fatalities from like Mortal Kombat 2, like, and understand that caused a massive uproar of violence in video games when we were younger, and every parent was like convinced that this was it. All these blood and guts that we were watching we're going to ruin us. And then you see it's on an original Sega. It's not like it's not that graphic, but I suppose to us it was back then.
It's interesting too, yeah, because I mean it was pretty bloody for the time. I mean, video games just typically didn't have blood at all. But I think the thing that I find really interesting about it is that in retrospect, it's pretty mild, and I think I am probably going to be like my parents. I'm not going to be as nuts about it, but I do think that, like, when I've seen people playing like Far Cry, for example, to me the violence in that just seems far more graphic than the stuff that we grew up with. And like, I don't know, there's an extent to which video games are just going to always push for more realism. And we were kind of around for, I remember playing Doom in the computer store on Post, which was funny because take that back, Wolfenstein. And the funny thing about Wolfenstein was that, technically speaking, they didn't sell Wolfenstein in Germany for obvious reasons. But it was an American military base, so they could. And I remember my brother found it, was playing it, and I came in and was like, what are you doing? And I watched it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, you fucking run around shooting people. It's so badass. And I wasn't using those languages because I would have gotten my mouth washed out with soap for talking that way. But I did think it was super cool. And then obviously, like, when we got our first like computer that could handle modern stuff, we my brother and I, had AOL and got the Doom demo where you could play one level of Doom, and had to leave the 14.4 modem on all night to download the Doom demo, which was like 5 megabytes, but took forever in 1994 or whatever. So yeah, playing Doom and thinking it was the coolest thing ever, and then like, yeah, those are some like the texture mapped 3D shooters. So then like Duke Nukem 3D came out.
Quake
and then,
was mine. Quake 1 and 2.
GoldenEye for N64, and before GoldenEye came out, you had Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which was one of like the big, early 3D shooters. You definitely had some more on PlayStation also, but I just didn't have a PlayStation, so I didn't until like I bought one myself later when I had a job. But I didn't really experience it very much. But yeah, like they have gotten more violent for sure. I don't think video games.
You mentioned Far Cry. Far Cry 6, the one that I'm currently working my way through, has active torture scenes in it, like, and as well as every Call of Duty game. But like, the thing is that I guess back then Mortal Kombat was the new game, and now just there's so much shit comes out. I guess you can't really keep up with it. Also, we're already morally bankrupted by all the violence, so it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things happening that are worse than video games. It's funny, too, because I don't know if you remember when Mortal Kombat 3 came out, but there were all of these, like, kind of rumors about it, like playground rumors about cool things you could do in Mortal Kombat. And I could have sworn, like, maybe it was not just fatalities, but they had, like, what is it, animality or whatever, and you could,
babyality, they had friendship.
Right, but like the animality was like the thing, they turn into an animal and kill you or whatever. And so like, of course, when you're 11 years old, a bunch of boys talking about video games, it's like, oh yeah, well my cousin, knows somebody who has the secret code and it's called like nudality or whatever, and like does sex moves.
Yes, I remember that.
And everyone's like, oh yeah, like Melina, like, because Melina's fatality is she like fucking basically like swallows you and spits out bones. And it's like, yeah, Melina's nudality, she like sucks you off and spits out a bone. I'm like, yeah, but there's not an actual bone in your dick, so that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, that's, you fucking nerd. Did they beat you up after that one?
I didn't say that one. It was somebody else who said it. But like in my mind, I was going to say it out loud. Like, hey, that doesn't really make sense. In the same way that when I was 8 and I was playing fucking Street Fighter 2 with my German little boy friends, and one of them was like, oh yeah, there's a secret code that if you kick Chun-Li in the boobs, then milk comes out. I'm like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But so in a way, it's like when people talk about like, oh, video games are corrupting youth. It's like, I think that my recollection of being a kid is that like nothing is more fun than swearing and like saying gross or what's perceived as like perverted or gross stuff, as long as it's like it's not crossing a certain line. And talking in hypotheticals is never really crossing a certain line. And so talking about weird hidden sex things in video games. Maybe our brains were corrupted by all the secret sex messages in Disney movies, like in The Lion King when the dust spells out sex, or the hard on in The Little Mermaid, or the secret voice thing at really quiet volume in Aladdin where it says take off your clothes, like stuff like that, that's 100% real. I mean, I will say the thing in The Little Mermaid like is kind of there.
It looks like a dick, to be sure.
No, it absolutely no. Well, there's The Little Mermaid, like the castle tower that looks like a dick, but then there's actually like when Ursula, or when, what is it, like, how is it happening that like Ursula is shape-shifting to look like Ariel, and the prince or whatever his name is has been like hypnotized, and so like they're being married on the boat or whatever, and there's Eric, and so Ursula's secretly gonna, in disguise, gonna marry Eric and then control the sea or whatever, and you see this brief scene where they walk up to the altar, and the priest, this kind of like fat awkward old priest, is just like, oh dearly beloved, but if you watch, like, he just, like, the way he's animated, it looks like he's gotten an erection. And they took that out of later versions, but I got that for my 6th birthday. So like at age like 8 or 9, I was like, oh, there's something perverted in The Little Mermaid. Of course I went and got in the VCR and fast forward and rewound
until I got to that point. Everything, yeah.
And yeah, like it I'm not going to pretend that it didn't look like what they were describing, and then also like it was, they did wind up removing it. And I heard a story that was like, they put that in there, like animators doing that in like a contract dispute with Disney. They're like, oh, you're not going to pay us? Well, then we're going to put a little Easter egg in there to make you guys look like freaks.
We're going to put dicks everywhere.
Yeah, but that's also one of those things where it's like that you could imagine that kind of a thing happening back in those days before, like, it was so much easier for rumors and things to spread. I mean, it's not that they weren't spreading.
It's not that hard. Like, you and I were both in the military. We understand that it's not that hard to ever believe that somebody would just be like, I'm just going to put some dicks on this.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that we've never really talked about on this show that I suppose we can talk about in the sort of last segment here before we hit up Ask a Dad, which is that I was always taken aback by this. I mean, it's not as if that's not a thing like in the Midwest, anywhere I've ever lived, where people, like teenagers, get spray paint and just draw dicks on things. I remember people doing big cock and balls in the snow at school and stuff like that. But in the military, the preponderance of drawing dicks on things, it's just to a different level. Like, it's a whole new echelon.
it reminds me, like, I think the closest we currently are to the people, the citizens of ancient Rome, is our military, because both groups love to draw dicks on stuff. Like, so whatever it is, and yeah, like and which always kills me about the woke shit about the military. It's like, we're not woke, and we are in fact incredibly gay constantly. We think it's funny. And it is. Like, it's that's just what that's how these dudes take care of themselves, I guess. But it is very strange. Like, I never drew a dick on anything. I didn't see the points. I, however, appreciated when I would go into a bathroom somewhere and there was a well-drawn one, because a lot of times you just see these little quick ones, like, take your time with it. Put a little artistry into it. So, and, of course, all the other graffiti. But I feel like, I don't know, like, maybe it's because your dick is out and it's the first thing that you think of. Just like, here's my dick. I might as well go ahead and draw a dick. Maybe they are drawing their own dicks. I don't know. If so, there's a lot of real big dicks in the military.
Yeah, I don't think that's the reason. I just think it's just people think it's funny. And I also think that let's be honest, I was in combat arms, so it was all male, and like the only women soldiers were like service support people that were in units that were attached to us. So it's just like dudes, for lack of a better word, are better at, they're better at drawing dicks than they are at drawing female genitalia, let's be honest. Like, I've seen some physiologically confused drawings because people do try to draw vaginas, but it tends to look really fucking embarrassingly bad. So I remember seeing a porta potty at Al Salim airfield in Kuwait that was just like everything floor to ceiling was covered in it. Like, people had just drawn dicks. Like, they'd drawn, like, as a joke, it was like the Sistine Chapel of using a Sharpie to draw a dick. Like, just balls on the absolute floor, head at the absolute ceiling. It was genuinely like, this must have taken at least 20, 30 minutes in a porta-john in Kuwait, where it's like 100 degrees at night.
There's some obvious, like, Michelangelos that we have in the military. They got rid of the 25 Mike series, man, and we didn't have anywhere for our illustrators to go, so now they have to draw dicks on stuff.
Yeah, they no longer had to go to military typography school to write rock or something, and so they had to find a new outlet for it. Yeah, I remember seeing like soldiers in Sharana doing it at FOB Sharana, but most of the time, like, I think the graffiti was less drawing dicks. It's just like talking shit about each other, talking shit about their officers, talking shit about whomever. There was definitely like some back and forth. I remember seeing people arguing about 9/11. Basically, like, contractors being like, soldiers should stop being dickheads to us, and everyone being like, shut up, you fucking pussies. Like, we actually have to go and fight a war. You guys are just here to make money. And it got back and forth, and they're like, oh, we're in the same fight. These are the guys who did 9/11. And someone's like, 9/11 was planned in Hamburg, Germany, and there were no Afghans involved. What the fuck are you talking about?
All right, so what do we got for an Ask a Dad? I'm in my pod shack, and I can't have the air conditioning on, and I am sweltering.
I can only imagine.
If ever I build another one of these, I'm going to have some big differences I'm going to put in.
So, I've got an open-ended one and a more specific one. So we'll start with the open-ended one because I think this is just general answers. Where the fuck do I meet women?
Fuck if I know.
Probably not in bars, I'll tell you that much. I mean, what?
The last woman I met was my wife, and that was, 13 years ago in a bar. So, do bar trivia, I suppose?
I met my wife on Twitter, but unfortunately Elon Musk has decided to take that away from us. I think that I remember a friend of mine saying that, like, because there was a woman that was basically he knew that had volunteered at this like a veteran charity sort of thing, and then had met someone there and was dating them, and he was like, well, I mean, it makes sense if you're a guy who wants to meet women, you go take a fucking like after work Italian language class, and if you're a girl who wants to meet guys, go to something involving veterans because it's going to be all dudes. I think, to be honest with you, the easiest answer is kind of annoying if, like, you have to move around or whatever if this doesn't apply, but like it's just doing stuff with friend groups. That's how most people meet significant others, is like through friends, doing things, whether it's like activities. I remember a guy who was a real fucking awkward guy in the army and wasn't really like hacking it too well psychologically. And he met his wife at like basically in Anchorage, he found a sort of like group about like people who want to like learn how to like live vegetarianly, like, you know, animal rights, but also just sort of like how to like a practical thing about vegetarian stuff. And he just like was interested in that. I remember, I mean, I didn't wind up dating this girl, but I made friends with the girl where like, I wonder if maybe we might've been able to date, like if I wasn't in the army and constantly deployed, at a group for basically like a cycle volunteer group where we like taught people how to fix bicycles and stuff.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of cool people there. So like, I just think weirdly, I'd say like activities and bars is not a good place. It can be, but like
when I met her in a bar, it's not like she was just a woman sitting there. Like we were playing trivia. She was on a trivia team that was opposite of us, but we had a friendly rival. We all knew each other, you know.
And I met somebody similarly where, like, once again, if I had been having to literally move in a couple of months, I mean, we were friends, and like I could imagine maybe that it might have worked out. She was a nurse in Columbus, in Georgia. I met her through a friend, basically, because we were doing trivia at a pizza place in Columbus, Georgia. So like stuff like that, I think, like friend group outings where friends are coming and people are getting introduced, things like that. That's my best advice, honestly. Yeah. Or like a specific activity where like you join a club, with a thing that like you're actually genuinely interested in. I don't recommend feigning interest to try to meet girls, but like if there's a thing that you're into, like obviously it's going to be a bit more of a struggle if it's like fucking Warhammer 40K, but you never know. But like stuff like that, I think is probably the best advice I can give, because when I think about how I met, well, I'm just going to go back in my head and think of all the people that I dated. I'm not going to count my girlfriend in high school because it makes sense. We were in high school together, and we'd like known each other since middle school. But I dated someone. I met him online. I dated somebody that I met through a friend of somebody. I was a friend of mine from Arabic class, and we would get dinner at this dining hall. And he knew her from high school, and so she sat with us one time, and that's how I got to know her. And then like I thought she fucking hated me, but then like years later we wound up dating. It was very strange.
Yeah, I think she
might have actually still hated me, but like somehow it worked out, or until it didn't. I met another one through a friend. We had gone to IU together, and then she had some specific question because I was working in Honduras, and we started talking online, and then we met. And then I met another girl on OkCupid, but it was the thing that was specifically interesting was she was doing this gallery exhibition that was like a thing about like artwork about the military presence, the U.S. military presence in Korea, and it was in this town called Chorwon, and like I had been there, and I was like, oh, that's funny. I literally like spent a bunch of this time this summer there, and we started talking about it, and then I met Cynthia on Twitter, and it was because of an article I'd written, and then we started having a conversation about. She was like, my advice to you as someone with a PhD is don't do a PhD, and we just started talking from there. So it's like I'm someone who hasn't been good about going and doing activities, and but as you can see, there was always a kind of association with something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that there's kind of a misconception that most relationships are started by like just randomly walking up to a woman and talking to her. Like that's just not how it works. Maybe it works for some people. I'm not going to say that it's 100%.
I knew somebody where it did happen, but sure. But it was genuinely.
That's not your only avenue, is what I'm trying to get to.
No, it's not. And in this case, it was less that and more a drunk guy enthusiastically talking to some people about a video he was watching, and they like thought it was funny. And then one of the girls in the group that was there started talking to one of the guys in our group, and then they wound up getting married.
Right.
So yeah,
a lot of it comes down to do you have like everybody that I've dated long term. Like, it was because of a friend group. It was never just somebody who I knew individually. It was always somebody who like, oh, I'm hanging out. I know this person's personality. We get along together. We can take this, further or beyond or something. Like one gal I worked with, we worked at different stores, but we talked on the phone all the time, just for work stuff. And then we met up and we started dating. And another one through trivia group. Before my wife, the gal I was dating, I met through my trivia group too. So like you said, like some kind of activity that you're interested in. Also, don't be afraid to just have women as friends. Because even if they don't want to date, you don't want to date, but you still find them interesting. Like it is possible to find a person of the opposite sex or of whatever you're attracted to, however you're attracted, to enjoy time with them and not fuck. And
yeah, the great I've got some really, really close friends that are women that like there's never been a question that like we weren't never going to date, but like we've got to be close friends. And like I know it feels like, oh, what a surprise! We've discovered fucking nuclear fusion. Like, you can be friends with women and not everything is predicated on sex. It's like, yeah, but like obviously, especially people our age, and I think like where we're from, you're kind of socialized to not, and so it's like, yeah, it weirdly just, I think being also, for better or worse, like coming across as an approachable person and just being cool and like hanging out with people, that does help. It may not help immediately, but it's certainly better than like, I don't know, fucking MRA websites.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Like, and those friends will know other people, and maybe you don't want to date, but maybe they have somebody that you can date. I went to an all-male high school, but I dated a lot of women in high school because of my friend Melissa, who went to a Catholic girls' school and doing theater. Like, half the dudes that did theater were gay, and then if we needed girls to be part of whatever production we're putting on, we got girls to come from the different girls' schools, and boys went to the different girls' schools to do their plays and stuff. Like, it was, and I was interested. I started theater because I wanted to meet girls, but eventually I did like, oh, this is kind of fun. I always wanted to be part of the chorus, never a part of the actual upfront, which worked out for me pretty well. What's our other question?
Our other question is perhaps a bit more specific, and it has to do with our favorite and or least favorite activity, yard work. What advice do you have on yard work? I own 1/3 of an acre with my wife. We both work now, and I can't seem to find a teenager to do the bulk of the work for us.
So, this is something, and my wife and I are talking about moving again, fleeing across the river over into Illinois. Mm-hmm. But we've been at our house since the pandemic began. So 2020, March 2020, we moved in. Or April, I can't remember. Anyway, around that time, I have been slowly replacing as much of the front. It's a very small house, but the front yard is slowly turning into, I put bulbs in, and we also keep it full of birds and bird seed and stuff, because half of the stuff that grows there grows from the bird seed. So sunflowers, squashes, all kinds of stuff. So it has this great look of like partially is planned and partially obviously is not. But it still looks really good. And I feel like what happens here, going on my own little dad rant here, the fucking problem is that we get these lawns and we put this grass down, and the grass doesn't fucking belong here. Like, whatever grass you have, it doesn't belong where you are. That's not Missouri grass that you've got, unless you've done something where you do, try to get rid of all that gross zoysia and grow clover or something. I'm a big fan of putting clover down. I want clover to take over because it's the first thing that blooms in the spring, so you get a lot of bees around, and also it doesn't grow very fast, so you don't have to mow it very often. But one of the problems I have to deal with is I have a slope on my yard, so I need to make sure that I have erosion control, so I can't take the grass out of that. So I think what I'm going to get to is wherever you're at, wherever you're living, take a look at what kind of native plants that you have there. The stuff that will bring butterflies, the stuff that'll bring bees, set up bird areas and stuff like that. And like, depending, like, I don't know how, I know some places are a bit bigger sticklers for mowing and not. I live in St. Louis City. They don't really give that much of a shit here, but I know some people live in places where it's a lot more draconian, or you've got an HOA that, it's just like it has to be cut or whatever. It has to be this specific. But if you have the freedom to, and if you have the ability to say, I can do whatever I want with this yard, try to slowly but surely kind of start turning it into a native area. And one of the other really great things about that is that once that kind of starts, you can shape and adjust it. Like, maybe you want to have a pathway through it, or maybe you want to start a garden. Like, I know you guys both work full time, and so a garden is a hard thing to do when you work full time. I know I work full time. I have a garden, but the slowly letting natives take over. If you get pushback, they're native plants, which is a big, like, there's a big conservation push right now all over the place, to have natives where you're at, rather than have all this invasive nonsense come around. So that would be my. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take some time. I don't know how much time you're looking to invest in the property, but that's kind of what I'm doing. I have a whole nother strip of land that next year is going to be all pollinators and milkweed for the monarchs, and it's just a strip of land. I don't mow it now. It looks like shit currently, but I also don't care. It's in the backyard. But that's the plan, is like, I don't have to deal with this because I'm just going to plant a bunch of natives, and it's just supposed to look that way. So that's what I would say that you should look into.
I would say for me, it's probably a far more simple and succinct answer, which is that you should probably figure out what you can use for both weed control, whether it's sprays or power tools, because doing it by hand, you can do it, and I've done it many a time, but weeds just love coming back, and it can get really, really frustrating. I think it's when you hire someone to do it and you're like, oh no, these guys just know how to use what they call a strimmer in Britain, but a weed whacker in America. It's like, I need to get a weed whacker. I'm just going to have to get one. Preferably one I can plug in, because then I don't have to fucking deal with getting a gas can when I don't have a car and filling it up without a car. I'm just going to get one because the weeds are always out of control.
I got a battery-powered one, man. It's great.
Yeah, I'll find something like that. I just need to get something. I haven't thought about it.
Go to the German Lowe's. I'm sure they've got something.
I just go to
the Swiss Lowe's.
I live in Britain still. I'll go to B&Q or Tool Station or Screwfix. Screwfix I don't think sells big heavy shit like that, but they might. But B&Q and Tool Station definitely do, so I'd probably just get one offline. I would say that, like, just be aware of the fact that, like, there is a sort of slow food movement style version of gardening, and like when it comes to organic stuff, like, you can do it, but it will take more work. And just be advised that, like, you're gonna want to just have the tool to do the job. And like I said, I know exactly what you mean, Francis, about lawns, because of course where we lived in Indiana, fucking, you had to have a lawn. It was the fucking HOA shit. And so, and you had to mow, and you had to weed, and you had to edge, and you had to, not edge like the masturbation thing, but like use, I think it's called an edger, to kind of trim the edge so it's flush with the concrete, what's it called, sidewalks and the road and stuff. And just like, yeah, it's so much work. It's so annoying.
Here, let me tell you something to do. Go look up German mound garden, the Hügelkultur, which is it's this German way of building a self-sustaining thing that's going to kind of break down, but it's also going to feed itself. It's just basically mounding up a bunch of stuff. If you get leaves, do it with that. If you want to do gardens, like, because you've got this big area, and again, I don't know how like fussy other people are going to be or how you like things to look, but I'm a very messy gardener. I love it. So you can just kind of like kind of dig up a little grass, dump a bunch of dirt down, and start throwing down seeds and letting that take over. Or like I said, create like a little garden or a bird area and let the birds take care of it. But that's something that you can kind of look into, because it's just like, why don't you just like take a bunch of logs and all the leaves that you raked up and kind of pile it all over here, throw some dirt on top of it, and then things will grow on it that, again, if you're trying to make it look nice, I'm probably not the person to come to. If you like that nice, like, look of a mowed or well-maintained lawn, that's not what I do. I begrudgingly mow when I have to, but everything else is just throw down seeds and see what happens. Which maybe you want to do. Go for it.
I'm just laughing because I was like, what on earth was the word you said? But then I looked it up and I'm like, yeah, you weren't too far off.
Hügelkultur.
Yeah, Hügelkultur. Yeah, I mean, it's just, yep, Hügel. I have not heard the word Hügel before. That's an interesting one.
Well, now you know. See, look at you. Even I can teach you German at this point. Just a little bit at a time.
I guess Hügel is mound. So cool. I've learned a new word.
Yeah.
I'll use that a lot, I'm sure. As opposed to like the last time I spoke German, which was on the train last week, speaking Hochdeutsch to Swiss German speakers because I can't speak Swiss German and asking for a spoon. Haben Sie einen Löffel? Anyway.
Well, if they tell you about their garden, you'll at least have
you're right.
You'll have an in.
Like, yeah. Oh my God, dude. Fuck. Well, episode, whole different subject for a different episode. But I went to Zurich and hung out with a fellow podcasting friend and got to hear a lot of Swiss German being spoken. And hoo boy. challenging. But anyway, we've done well over an hour. It's a long one for a dad chat. So I know you're sweating it out in that fucking hot box.
Hot box over here.
So I'll let you finish. We'll get out of here. But to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to this show. We hope you enjoy it. We greatly appreciate when you recommend it word of mouth to people because that seems to be a huge way for more people to find out and become fans. And obviously, we have a Patreon. For $5 a month, you can get any content we have put out since we started the Patreon in the beginning of 2017. So it's all in that tier. And then obviously at a higher tier, Francis will send you swag every quarter.
Yeah.
So look into that. And there'll be links to that in the description of this on whatever app you are using to play podcasts. So just look for that.
Yep.
And then until next week, Francis, it's been great. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Talk to you guys later.
Zoom, zoom, zoom.